Mark Mitchell was the kind of man people trusted without hesitation. In his suburban neighborhood just outside Phoenix, he was known for his calm demeanor, his professionalism as a financial advisor, and his unwavering devotion to his wife, Crystal. Their two-story brick house was the envy of the block, always decorated for the seasons and filled with the smell of fresh baking or lemon-scented cleaner. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But perfection has a way of hiding what truly matters. Crystal had always been seen as the vibrant half of the couple. She taught fitness classes at a boutique gym 3 days a week and maintained a wellness blog that had slowly grown a loyal following. She wrote about marriage, balance, nutrition, and how to keep passion alive in long-term relationships. Her social media presence was polished filtered selfies in yoga wear, neatly plated meals, uplifting quotes about love and connection. Anyone who scrolled through her feed would assume she was deeply in love with her husband. Behind the scenes, though, things had begun to shift. It started subtly. Crystal began taking more solo trips under the name of brand collaborations or fitness seminars. She claimed these were opportunities to grow her blog, meet influencers, and secure sponsorships. Mark, who had always been supportive of her dreams, never objected. He believed in her work and was proud of how far she had come from being a bored housewife to a mini online celebrity. But over time, the distance between them grew, not just physically but emotionally. Crystal became distracted at home. Her phone was always face down, her laptop locked, and her eyes distant during dinner. Mark assumed it was stress or perhaps burnout. He gently offered to help more, encouraged her to rest, even suggested they take a weekend off together. But she declined every time with some new excuse. Mark never considered betrayal as a possibility. He believed that loyalty was the foundation of their marriage, and he had never once suspected Crystal of lying. She had always been a little private, a little controlling, but never cruel. That trust would be the very thing that blinded him. What Mark didn't know was that Crystal had begun leading a double life. A hidden phone set buried beneath skincare products in her bathroom drawer, protected by a password even Mark didn't know. On that phone were months of private texts, encrypted chats, hotel bookings, and explicit videos, messages, and memories, shared with a man Mark had never heard of, never even imagined his wife would associate with. The man was not part of her blog network, not a fitness coach or a brand representative. He was a former adult film actor named Dante Ray. Crystal had discovered him during a late-night scroll through a podcast feed, intrigued by an interview where he talked about life beyond the screen and what it meant to feel truly alive. That spark lit a flame in her. She began following his private accounts, watching his live streams, sending messages under a fake name. It was harmless at first, or so she convinced herself. But soon, harmless curiosity turned into obsession. Crystal arranged to meet him under the pretense of a blog summit in Las Vegas. What happened there became a secret she kept buried deep. Their relationship became physical, then emotional, then addictive. She felt wanted in a way she hadn't felt in years. Dante gave her attention, validation, and promises of a new life. And Crystal, trapped in a marriage that now felt suffocating, began to dream of escape. Still, she kept up appearances. Weekly date nights with Mark, Instagram posts of smiling selfies together, polished blog entries about marital bliss. But every time she kissed Mark goodnight, her mind was somewhere else, wrapped around a fantasy that was slowly becoming a dangerous reality. And Mark? He never saw it coming. Dante Ray was not the kind of man you brought home to your family. His career in the adult film industry had been brief but explosive, making him a minor celebrity in certain online circles. After stepping away from the mainstream spotlight, he transitioned into private content and underground shows that catered to high-paying clients. He was bold, reckless, and lived without boundaries. For Crystal, he represented everything her life wasn't: unpredictable, raw, and thrilling. Their connection deepened quickly after that first meeting in Las Vegas. It didn't feel like a fling to Crystal, it felt like a transformation. With Dante, she didn't have to play the role of the polished wife or the wellness influencer. She could be someone else entirely free, impulsive, untamed. She craved his attention like a drug, and he knew exactly how to keep her hooked. What started as flirty exchanges turned into long video calls, secret photos, and digital confessions. That grew darker over time. Dante was an expert manipulator. He understood the psychology of control, especially over people who lived in tightly structured environments. Crystal's carefully curated world of meal plans and inspirational quotes made her an easy target. He told her what she wanted to hear, that she was wasted in her current life, that Mark didn't deserve her, that she was beautiful, powerful, and capable of so much more. She believed every word. Slowly, Dante became the center of her world. It wasn't long before he began asking for money. At first, it was subtle. He claimed he needed help upgrading his equipment or launching a new content platform. Then came sudden emergencies, a broken-down car, legal trouble, hospital bills. Crystal, eager to please and terrified of losing him, began sending money. She pulled from her blog income at first, then from her savings. But it wasn't enough. Dante wanted more, and Crystal didn't know how to say no. So she crossed another line. She began transferring small amounts from Mark's business account, telling herself it was temporary, that she'd pay it back. She memorized his login credentials and used his laptop when he was asleep. It felt wrong, but the fear of losing Dante was stronger than her guilt. The withdrawals grew larger over time. $1,000 turned into $5,000, then $10,000. Mark started noticing, but Crystal always had an answer. A tax mix-up, a vendor error. He trusted her to handle the books when he was busy. That trust became her weapon. With money flowing regularly, Dante's demands escalated. He began to hint at a future together, but only if Crystal could cleanly cut ties with Mark. He warned that once the affair came out, Crystal would lose everything: her marriage, her blog, her reputation. She would be humiliated, sued, and left with nothing. He painted Mark as a controlling figure, someone who would turn vindictive once he discovered the truth. Dante said the only path forward was total freedom, and that meant removing Mark from the equation entirely. At first, Crystal resisted. Murder was not something she had ever imagined. But Dante was patient and relentless. He played on her fears, whispered fantasies about a new life in another country, a joint content empire, complete independence. He said that love sometimes required hard choices, that people like Mark didn't just let go, they had to be erased. Crystal was trapped in a reality she no longer recognized. She was in too deep. The lies, the theft, the secret life it had, all spiraled into something monstrous. She had built her blog on the illusion of empowerment, but now she was powerless, held hostage by a man who had never loved her, only controlled her. She didn't know how to escape. And as Dante began mapping out the next steps, she started to believe that the only way out was through blood. Crystal's mind became a battlefield of panic and persuasion. Every day she spent beside Mark now felt like a countdown. The life they had built together was turning into a fragile illusion, one wrong glance or question away from shattering. She avoided his eyes during breakfast, flinched when he touched her, and grew more distant with each passing night. Meanwhile, Dante's influence deepened. He flooded her inbox with ultimatums, fantasies, and threats. He told her there was no turning back now, that Mark's time was up. To Crystal, it didn't feel like she was planning a murder. It felt like she was desperately trying to avoid her world crashing down. Dante had made her believe that everything was already broken. He told her that if she didn't act soon, Mark would uncover the missing money, press charges, and make her a public disgrace. She imagined her blog destroyed, her name dragged through tabloids, and her image shattered. The fear gripped her. tighter than any sense of morality. It started with simple preparations. Crystal scouted remote locations under the guise of planning a digital detox weekend getaway. She found a secluded cabin near Sedona. No nearby neighbors, limited cell service, and thick forest on all sides. It was picturesque, private, and perfect for what Dante had described. She booked the cabin under Mark's name and convinced him it would be a romantic break from their busy lives. Mark, ever eager to reconnect, agreed without question. Crystal then purchased a burner phone and gave Dante precise instructions. She sent him the cabin's coordinates, a spare key hidden under the porch, and details of the sleeping arrangements. She even mapped out the timing Mark's routines, when he would be most vulnerable and when the alarm system would be off. Each step made her heart pound harder, but she kept telling herself it was survival. If she didn't do this, she'd lose everything. The final days before the trip were unbearable. Mark packed bags with excitement, suggesting hikes and bringing board games. Crystal could barely fake a smile. Every kind gesture from him made the weight of her betrayal feel heavier. She wasn't just killing a man, she was destroying someone who still loved her, someone who believed in her goodness. But Dante's voice echoed louder in her head, reminding her that there was no forgiveness on the other side of discovery. Only ruin. On the morning of the trip, Crystal deleted messages, cleared call logs, and told herself this would be the last time she'd have to lie. Mark drove them through winding desert roads, talking about how nice it would be to unplug and reconnect. Crystal stared out the window, counting each mile like a step toward a point of no return. When they arrived, the cabin was everything she had promised: quiet, scenic, untouched by time. That night, Crystal made dinner, lit candles, and pretended to embrace the moment. Mark kissed her cheek and told her he was glad they had come. She forced a nod, then excused herself to the bathroom, where she texted the signal to Dante. "Everything is ready." Outside, hidden in the trees, Dante was already watching. He had arrived hours earlier and waited in silence, wearing gloves and dark clothing. He had no doubt about what had to be done. Crystal had promised him everything: money, loyalty, a new life. All that stood in the way was the man asleep inside the cabin. Mark climbed into bed, unaware that the person lying next to him had already chosen his fate. Crystal stared at the ceiling, too afraid to close her eyes. She knew that once night fell completely, there would be no turning back, and somewhere in the silence, death was already on its way. The silence around the cabin was thick, broken only by the soft rustle of trees swaying in the desert wind. Mark had fallen into a deep sleep, breathing slowly under the heavy blankets. The day had been uneventful: quiet walks, a shared meal, a few laughs. For a moment, Crystal almost believed in the lie they had built. But now, lying next to him, the weight of what she had set in motion pressed down like a stone on her chest. She had sent the signal. She had opened the door. There was no taking it back. At 2:17 a.m., the doorknob turned without a sound. The back door had been left unlocked, just as Crystal had promised. Dante stepped inside, moving with practiced silence, wearing black gloves and dark clothing. In his hand was a metal crowbar, wrapped with cloth to reduce noise. His eyes adjusted quickly to the dim interior. He had studied the layout. He knew the path. He didn't hesitate. Crystal, fully awake, stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding so loud she thought it might wake Mark. She heard the faint creak of the floor. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. The moment had arrived, and now that it was real, it felt like drowning. In the hallway, Dante moved toward the master bedroom. As he pushed the door open, a soft squeak from the hinges startled Mark. Awake. At first, Mark was groggy and confused, thinking maybe Crystal had gotten up for water. But then he saw the figure in the doorway, the mask, the weapon. Instinct kicked in. Mark scrambled to his feet, reaching for the lamp on the nightstand. It crashed to the floor as he grabbed it, swinging blindly. The lamp connected with Dante's shoulder, causing him to stumble. Crystal screamed, not because she wanted to stop it, but because it was finally happening. Everything was real. The struggle was short and violent. Mark was strong, fueled by confusion and fear, but Dante was prepared. He slammed the crowbar into Mark's side, knocking the wind out of him. Another blow to the head sent him crashing to the floor. Still, Mark crawled, reaching for the fireplace poker across the room. He never made it. Dante straddled him, pressing a pillow over his face while Crystal stood frozen near the wall. Mark's muffled gasps lasted only seconds. His legs kicked, then went still. Crystal turned away, unable to watch. The room smelled of sweat, iron, and fear. When it was over, Dante stood over the body, panting, the pillow still in his hand. Mark's eyes were open, staring at nothing. The cleanup began immediately. Dante wiped down every surface he had touched. He burned his gloves in the fireplace and threw his mask into a duffel bag. Crystal, still trembling, tried to help but couldn't stop crying. Dante hissed at her to get it together. They had a story to stick to. By sunrise, Crystal called 911, her voice shaking. She told the dispatcher there had been a break-in, that her husband had been attacked by a masked intruder. She described the struggle, her screams, how she had hidden in the bathroom. The operator assured her help was on the way. Crystal collapsed on the porch, sobbing into her hands as the sirens echoed in the distance. When the police arrived, they found Crystal covered in bruises she had inflicted on herself with a hairbrush. The scene looked chaotic but oddly clean. There was no sign of forced entry. Still, they took her statement and marked it as a possible burglary gone wrong. Mark's body was covered and taken away. The officers offered their condolences. Crystal nodded blankly, but even as she clutched a blanket around her shoulders and sipped warm tea, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The plan had worked, the story had held. But the nightmare was only just beginning. Asterisk in the days following Mark's death, the story played well in the media. Crystal was presented as a heartbroken wife who had narrowly escaped a violent intruder. The suburban community mourned the loss of a beloved man and rallied around her, dropping off meals, sending condolences, and sharing photos of happier times. Her blog, once a haven for lifestyle tips, transformed overnight into a platform for grief. Thousands of comments poured in from strangers expressing sympathy. She posted emotional tributes, shared her pain publicly, and even hinted at starting a foundation in Mark's name. From the outside, she looked like a widow trying to survive the unimaginable. But behind the scenes, things weren't adding up. The police began their investigation with routine procedures. They searched for signs of forced entry and analyzed the cabin security. There were none, no broken windows, no damaged locks. That struck the detectives as strange. An intruder targeting a remote cabin without leaving any sign behind was unlikely. Then came the bruises. The medical examiner noted they were shallow and inconsistent with defensive wounds. Forensics couldn't find any foreign fingerprints or footprints, and the entire scene appeared too clean, unnaturally so. Detectives quietly began digging into the couple's financials. That's when the red flags began to multiply. Over $40,000 had been siphoned from Mark's accounts over the past 6 months, transferred in small amounts to a PayPal account linked to an alias. Crystal claimed she had no idea about the money, but a closer look at the devices in their home told a different story. Her fingerprints were found on Mark's laptop, specifically in files marked with transfers and spreadsheets. She had been logging in while he slept. Then came the breakthrough. A subpoenaed IP address from the aliases. PayPal activity led authorities to a burner phone registered under a fake name, but traced to Crystal's gym's Wi-Fi. The messages and emails recovered from that phone were damning, flirty exchanges, explicit plans, hotel bookings, and conversations discussing getting rid of the problem. It didn't take long to identify the man in the messages. Dante. Ray had used various pseudonyms online, but his past work and digital trail made him easy to find. His real name was Raymond Porter, and he had a string of prior arrests, domestic violence, assault, and financial fraud. Detectives located him at a beachside Airbnb in California, living under a false identity and carrying a duffel bag filled with cash, burner phones, and Crystal's jewelry. When arrested, Dante first claimed he didn't know Crystal. Then he admitted they had a relationship but denied any involvement in the murder. He said she had manipulated him, used him, and tried to frame him. Crystal, meanwhile, stuck to her story, claiming Dante had acted alone. She insisted she was just a victim used and abandoned, but the digital evidence was too strong. Screenshots, call logs, payment records, and private videos left little room for doubt. The case went to trial nearly a year after Mark's death. The courtroom was packed. The prosecution painted a chilling portrait of deception, greed, and emotional manipulation. They showed how Crystal had constructed an entire false identity to pursue an affair, funded it with stolen money, and orchestrated her husband's murder. The defense tried to frame her as a woman trapped in an abusive fantasy, too scared to say no, but jurors didn't buy it. Both Crystal and Dante were convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy. They were sentenced to life without parole. Mark Mitchell was remembered in a quiet memorial by family and colleagues. The man who had trusted too deeply, loved too freely, and never saw the darkness creeping into his home was buried under a headstone that read, *loyal to the end, the story shocked the nation. A wellness blogger, an adult film star, and a husband who never stood a chance. Behind the filtered photos and marriage advice, there had always been something hidden. And in the end, it was that secret that killed him.